Hi, today is the 26th of October 2021. My dad was born on the 13th of February 25. When they went to register him, they were superstitious and decided to register him down as the 12th of February, and so the annals of history will always reflect that he was in fact born on the 12th and not the 13th. After school, he went to University of Cape Town. That was interrupted by the war, and when he came back from the war, he finished his medical degree in Cape Town and then went to do his housemanship up in Natal at Addington Hospital. Whilst he was in Natal, he was playing for Natal rugby, and he was capped as a Springbok out of the Natal province. And as anybody who knows my dad will know about his history in rugby, and as the anaesthetist in the first heart transplant in 1967. But I'm just discussing Cecil, my dad, not Dr. Cecil Moss. So my dad was always a soft-spoken gentleman.
Yes,
Absolutely.
and what he was trying to say to me was, look, well done, because I was the captain of this little team. Well done, and I'm not going to punish you for being 5 minutes late. I'll never forget it.
He tried to install a feeling of equality amongst all people, fairness. He treated everybody with fairness. He didn't enjoy conflict.
And the class master just looked at me and said, sit down, Moss, you're okay. And he had obviously watched this match, this mismatch, as it were. I'll never forget that. Another one, often, when you're in authority, you must realize there are some times when you've got to use your
Discretion.
your
Discretion.
Some are more equal than others.
Yes.
He was a peacemaker at heart, and he wanted to do good for his fellow man, and I suspect that's why he went into medicine in the first place. We had a little tradition that on Sundays,
I'm your good luck charm, eh? You must admit that.
And now you're going to be my good luck charm.
I will be your good luck charm. But
we would go to his place and we would have cake, and a whole tea would be laid out for us.
Piece of fruit cake, right?
Very nice.
Generous. Right up until the end, my mom was a very generous person. And we would have tea and cakes, and 9 times out of 10 we would bring unopened packets of cakes and scones and eclairs and tarts home with us. And he always made sure that we had enough of everything. He himself was a very generous person, and although he was a tough love, because being the generation that came out of the war, the generation that came out of the flu, out of the Great Depression, they showed their love by working and providing and supplying. And so there weren't a lot of hugs and kisses, but boy, he supplied us with everything we needed. And that was the way that he showed his love for his family. The thing as he got older and older is that he wasn't that mighty support that he had been in my earlier childhood. As the Bible says, his horn passed from him. His power passed from him, and was what rocked my world, I suppose. But I also saw that he bore that and my mom's complaints with dignity. And even in the last month, he said, I wish that you would know Mom like I knew her. So he always kept a perspective which loved his family. Towards the end, my mom was showing signs of dementia and that she was not going to be able to look after herself. And so he set about the task of making her secure, as he knew that he obviously he would always say statistically at 93 he hasn't got long to live. But I'm pretty sure that he knew a lot more about that than he was letting on. His last real great work was to move them from Monaghan Mews to Summerley. And they did that early on in 2017. And he then made sure that my mom was installed safely in Summerley, which had medical facilities and cooking facilities and cleaning and everything that she would need for the remainder of her life. And then he got my sister, Tessa, to come visit. I said, Dad, you've just moved properties. Why are you rushing to get Tessa? Why don't you just take some time off before Tessa arrives? Because Tessa, coming from Australia, was always not a burden, but always required a lot of energy, and he was slowing down a lot. And he said, Jamie, I don't have much time left. I want to get this done. And so Tessa came out and spent time with him. And lo and behold, it wasn't many weeks after she went back to Australia that he fell over a clothesline in the entrance hall stroke dining room area and fell. So the story is, as always is the case, that he fell and broke his hip. But looking at the MRI scan, it's also quite possible that he stood up, fractured his hip, took the corner, couldn't support his body weight and fell. And that was the last night that he spent at home with my mom. The next morning at 6:15, I got the phone call. Hi, Dad.
Hello, Jamie.
Yeah.
Look, I've had a very bad accident last night. I fell
Yeah.
and all sorts of complications now. What are your movements like this morning?
He said, I don't want to disturb anybody. I don't want to cause a problem. He'll go through to Constantiaberg at 9 o'clock in the morning. I said, not a chance is that going to happen. And I got hold of an ambulance and he went through to Constantiaberg. And as it was, he lay in Constantiaberg probably the large majority of the day in the emergency ward until they could actually free up a bed for him. Many years previously, my dad had an aortic replacement, valve replacement, and so he was on warfarin, and they weren't able to operate immediately on him because the warfarin meant his blood was still too thin, and so they needed to wait 3 days for his blood to thicken up. And also the x-ray didn't show a definitive fracture. It was only once they did an MRI that they could see that the neck of the femur had in fact broken, and they decided to operate. And his big thing was that, number one, my mom would be looked after, and then number two, we, his children, would be provided for. And he put in place those things. On the 27th of October at 12 o'clock, I went to visit him. He wanted to say, I've had a good life. He's got no regrets, and indeed he had no regrets. The doctors had spoken to him and actually pumped him up that he was saying when he comes out of the operation he's going to go back into the swimming pool and start exercising to lose the kilogram or two that he'd put on, and started to take care of himself again, because he had for so long looked after my mom and the worry of what would happen when he dies. The last thing he said to me in the flat was, "Look after mom." And I obviously said, "Of course I will." I saw him at 12 o'clock. He had got a lot of hope back that he would make it through the operation, but he already knew that that was not going to happen. He said so on the morning of the 25th. Yeah.
And all sorts of complications now.
And so the hip replacement was a success. And just towards the end of the operation, he had something in his brain. He had cardiac arrest. He was moved through to ICU, and that night he had a major heart attack and
ICU. I'm phoning in connection with your father, Dr. Cecil Moss.
yes.
And look, he hasn't been doing very well for the day. I think you probably know that.
Yeah.
And I've just come on duty, and in actual fact, he deteriorated very rapidly in the last 20 minutes, and he's since passed away.
I can honestly say that we had no regrets. He and I understood each other, and we had no regrets, and to this day I can only wish him well wherever he is, whatever he's doing.